Before we begin, pause for a moment. Take a breath. Because this story is going to ask something of you. It's going to ask you to feel what it's like to be completely alone in a crowd of 400 people. To be a good man in a world that has decided good is not enough. And then it's going to ask you to watch what happens when that man refuses to disappear. This is Dublin. This is a Tuesday morning in November. The sky is the color of old pewter, and the Liffey is doing what the Liffey always does, moving fast and not looking back. And somewhere in Clontarf, in a narrow terrace house with one car in the driveway and a handmade birthday banner still taped to the front window from 2 weekends ago, a man named Liam Connelly is already awake. Liam is 34 years old. He works as a senior data analyst at StratumTech, one of Ireland's fastest-growing B2B software companies. His salary is good, not great, but good, and in another life, in the life he had planned, Siobhan would have been starting her own physiotherapy practice about now, and they'd have been arguing about whether to extend the kitchen or take Aoife to Portugal for the summer. That was the plan. Plans, as Liam knows better than most, are optimistic fictions we tell ourselves to get through the uncertainty of being alive. Siobhan died 22 months ago. Ovarian cancer. She was 31. The diagnosis came on a Thursday afternoon. She was gone by the following March. Liam measures time differently now. Before March, and after. And in all the months since March, all the school runs and permission slips and nights where the silence in the house is so loud it has a texture, Liam has never once let his daughter see him break. Aoife is 7. She has her mother's red hair and her father's obstinate jaw and a habit of asking questions that make Liam have to leave the room for a moment before he can answer them. Last Tuesday she asked him if stars can feel lonely. He said he didn't think so. She said she thought they could, because they're all so far apart. He cried in the bathroom for 4 minutes and came back smiling. This is what parenting alone looks like. This is what love under enormous pressure looks like. At StratumTech, Liam is what the industry calls a quiet performer. His work is exceptional. His predictive models have saved the company an estimated €2.3 million in client churn over 18 months. His annual reviews say things like reliable, analytical, focused. What they don't say, what no one ever says out loud, is that Liam leaves at 5:30 p.m. every day, and in the unwritten language of corporate ambition, that is a confession. It means, I have something outside this place that matters more. And Marcus Vane, the man at the top of StratumTech, has never forgiven anyone for that. Marcus Vane built StratumTech from a 3-person startup in Cork into a 300-employee operation with offices in Dublin, London, and Amsterdam. He is brilliant, demanding, and absolutely certain that he is the smartest person in any room he enters. He rewards presence over product. He notices who stays late. He has been known to email staff at 11 p.m. and interpret response time as commitment. He has 2 ex-wives. He has a son he barely knows. He once described work-life balance in a Forbes interview as a concept designed for people who don't care enough. The article was shared 14,000 times. He thought that was a compliment. Now. The summit. Let's go there. Let's stand in that room with Liam and feel what he felt, because you need to feel it before the rest of this story means what it's supposed to mean. The StratumTech annual Dublin Summit is held every November at the Convention Centre on the Liffey. 400 employees. 12 external investors. 8 media and press representatives. A stage. Lights. A live stream that will later be archived on the company's YouTube channel, which is how it will reach 3 million people in 48 hours. Liam almost didn't come. He considered calling in unwell. Aoife had had a cough all week and he'd spent 3 nights sleeping on the floor beside her bed just to be sure. But the summit was mandatory attendance. Vane had made that clear in the all-staff email with the slightly threatening subject line that read, November 14th. Be there. Be present. Mean it. So Liam arranged for his neighbor, Mrs. Keane, to collect Aoife from school. He ironed his good shirt. He got on the bus. Marcus Vane opened the summit with his usual performance. He was good at this, the big vision speech, the data made cinematic, the sense that you were watching history be written in real time. He talked about growth. He talked about the future. He talked about the kind of people who build something that lasts versus the kind who simply pass through. And then, 40 minutes in, he said something that made the room shift. He said, "I want to address something directly. Something that has been on this company's radar for several weeks. Because one of the principles I have always held is that when someone betrays the trust of an institution, they don't get to do it quietly. They don't get to slip out the back door. Accountability is a public act. And I believe in accountability." Then he said Liam's name. "Liam Connelly, would you join me on stage?" And the room turned, 400 faces swiveling in unison, and Liam, sitting in the third-to-last row, felt his entire nervous system go quiet in the specific way that happens when your body understands something terrible before your mind does. He walked to the stage. He doesn't know why. He says now that it was the same instinct that makes you reach for the railing before you know you're falling. He just moved. And he stood there, beside Marcus Vane, under the lights, facing 400 colleagues, and Vane said, calmly, with the performance of a man who had rehearsed this, "Liam has been using company time, company systems, and what I believe are company-derived insights to develop a competing product. He has been, in the most direct language I can use, stealing from this company. And stealing from every one of you." The room was silent. Not the polite silence of an audience waiting for the next point. The silence of 400 people holding their breath because they understood, instinctively, viscerally, that they were watching something that should not be happening in a room like this. And in that silence, Liam Connelly looked at Marcus Vane, and he said, "I'd like to speak to legal." 4 words. Quiet. Clear. And everything that followed was determined in that moment. The video was everywhere by 6 p.m. Someone in the back row had filmed the whole thing on a Samsung Galaxy and posted it without a caption, just the raw footage, 22 minutes of it, starting from the moment Vane said Liam's name. It had 40,000 views by the time Liam got home. It had 200,000 by the time he put Aoife to bed. It had crossed 1 million by midnight, and the conversation around it was not what Marcus Vane had expected. Because Marcus Vane had assumed the narrative. He had made his accusation publicly, confidently, before any legal process had concluded, before HR had formally investigated, before Liam had been given the opportunity to respond. And the people of Dublin, and then the people of the internet, had looked at the footage and done a very simple calculation: a 52-year-old CEO in a €10,000 suit publicly humiliating a man they could immediately tell was running on empty. And the maths didn't add up in Vane's favor. The hashtag Leave Liam Alone appeared within 3 hours. By morning it was trending in Ireland, the UK, and had begun spreading in the US and Australia, carried by Irish diaspora communities who have a particular and ancient sensitivity to seeing one of their own knocked down by someone with power. Comments poured in. Some were from people who had never heard of StratumTech. Some were from StratumTech employees who had attended the summit and were already talking to journalists. Connor Lynch rang Liam at 11:42 p.m. Liam let it go to voicemail. He already knew, not with evidence, not yet, but with the cellular-level knowledge of someone who has trusted a person completely and felt that trust become hollow before they could name why. He sat in the kitchen after Aoife was asleep and he did not cry. He looked at the framed photo of Siobhan on the shelf and he had the conversation with her that he always had when things fell apart, the one that exists entirely in silence, entirely in his chest, and then he made himself a cup of tea and opened his laptop. What Liam opened was not a document about StratumTech. What he opened was a folder named CF_build_log, and inside it, 347 time-stamped entries stretching back 18 months, documenting every hour of work he had put into ClearFlow Analytics. Every line of code written on his personal MacBook. Every idea logged before implementation. Every email from Aisling Moran. Every draft term sheet from Crestline Capital. He had built this record the way a man builds a life raft, not because he expected the ship to sink, but because he knew the ocean and he wasn't willing to bet Aoife's future on good weather. Clearflow Analytics was Liam's answer to a problem he had watched StratumTech ignore for 3 years. Small and medium Irish businesses were hemorrhaging cash not because of bad products or weak sales, but because their cash flow forecasting was built on guesswork in spreadsheets from 2009. He had built a predictive model, clean, elegant, scalable, that could take a company's transaction data and tell them within a 4% margin of error exactly when they would hit a liquidity crisis and what they could do about it before it happened. It was, by any objective measure, genuinely brilliant. Dr. Aisling Moran had found out about Clearflow the way she found out about most things worth knowing, through someone who knew someone. A former student of hers had mentioned in passing that Liam Connelly was building something in his evenings that sounded interesting. Aisling had emailed Liam. Liam had nearly deleted the email. Then he'd reread it 4 times and replied at 2:14 a.m. Aisling Moran is the kind of person who makes you feel, for the first time in a long time, that your mind is interesting. She had been Liam's econometrics lecturer at UCD 12 years ago and she had told him then that he thought in a way that was worth protecting. She had meant it. And when she saw what he had built in the evenings, in the stolen hours after Aoife was asleep, she understood that what Liam needed was not encouragement, he had enough belief in the work. What he needed was infrastructure. She introduced him to the partners at Crestline Capital. She made him file the patent. She made him document every building block of Clearflow in a cleanroom log that would make any IP challenge from a previous employer a very expensive and probably unsuccessful exercise. She did all of this with the specific pragmatism of someone who has watched talent get eaten alive by circumstances before and is not going to let it happen again. The Crestline term sheet had arrived 6 weeks before the summit. Liam had sat with it for 3 days before signing. He told no one. Not Connor. Not his sister in Galway. He put the signed document in the same folder as the build logs and told himself he would tell people when there was something real to tell. He was careful. He had Aoife to think about. He was always careful. What Liam did not know, what he would only discover the following morning, when Aisling rang him at 7:15 a.m., was that the lead investment partner at Crestline Capital, a man named Declan Fury, had been seated in the 3rd row at the StratumTech summit. He had watched the entire incident. He had filmed none of it. He had left the hall without speaking to anyone. And that evening, he had called an emergency partners meeting. Declan Fury had made his money reading people. He had invested in 31 companies over 20 years. He had backed 3 unicorns. He had also walked away from investments worth hundreds of millions because he didn't like the person asking for the money. He had one rule above all others: never invest in a company led by someone who cannot distinguish between power and cruelty. He had watched Marcus Vane on that stage and he had reached a very fast and very final conclusion. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Because before the reversal comes, and it is coming, and it is extraordinary, there is still the night to get through. The long night when Liam Connelly sat in his kitchen in Clontarf with a cold cup of tea, reading the comments, reading the articles, watching the thing he had tried to build in the quiet and the dark be pulled into the public light before he was ready. And at some point past 2 in the morning, he got up, and he went into Aoife's room, and he stood in the doorway and watched her sleep. He stood there for a long time. And he thought about Siobhan, who would have known exactly what to say. He thought about Conor Lynch, whose silence had a shape to it now that he was starting to recognize. He thought about Marcus Vane, who had looked him in the eye on that stage and decided he was the kind of man who could be broken publicly without consequences. And he thought, I have been building this quietly because I was afraid. And the thing about being afraid is that at some point it either kills you or it doesn't. He went back to the kitchen. He opened a new document. And he wrote a message to Aisling Moran. 4 words. Just, I'm ready. Tell Declan. Then he closed the laptop, washed his mug, checked that the front door was locked, and went to bed. For the first time in 22 months, he slept straight through until morning. Now. Connor Lynch. We need to talk about Connor Lynch, because this story is not complete without understanding the specific gravity of what he did, and what he didn't do. Connor has been Liam's friend since their first week at StratumTech. He was at Siobhan's funeral. He stood in the rain at Glasnevin Cemetery in November wearing the wrong shoes, and he didn't leave until Liam did. He is not a bad man. He is a frightened one. And frightened men, at the crucial moment, often make the choice that confirms their fear rather than confronting it. When Marcus Vane had called Connor into his office 6 weeks earlier and asked about the late-night system logins from the analytics team, Connor had not lied outright. He had simply failed to protect Liam the way Liam would have, without a moment's hesitation, protected him. He had allowed the thread to be pulled. And in the 48 hours after the summit, as the internet raged and journalists rang and Liam did not answer his calls, Connor Lynch sat with the weight of that in a way that, if he is honest, he is still sitting with now. The morning of day 3 after the summit. Wednesday. Liam took Aoife to school via the seafront, the long way, through the salt air and the sound of the tide, and he told her that he had something exciting happening with his work project. She asked if she could see it. He said, soon. She asked if it was the thing he'd been doing on his laptop at night. He said yes. She said, I knew it was good. You always look like you're thinking very hard when you work on it. He had to turn toward the sea for a moment. Just a moment. At 9:04 a.m., Crestline Capital posted on LinkedIn. The announcement was precise, professional, and devastating in its timing. It read, Crestline Capital is proud to announce our Series A investment in Clearflow Analytics, an Irish-founded predictive cash flow intelligence platform led by founder Liam Connelly. Clearflow's proprietary model represents a significant advancement in SME financial planning. We are honored to partner with Liam as he builds the company that Siobhan would have been proud of. That last sentence. Aisling had added it. Declan Fury had approved it without hesitation. The Irish Times had the story by 10 a.m. By midday, the BBC had picked it up. The narrative had flipped with the speed that only the internet can generate, and only when the underlying story is genuinely compelling, which this one was. Because the thing the public had intuitively felt when they watched that summit video, that they were watching a man be crushed by someone who didn't know what they were crushing, had turned out to be exactly true. The underdog had been building. Quietly. In the dark. After bedtime. And he had built something real. StratumTech's legal team had, by this point, already spoken with Liam's solicitor, a very efficient woman named Mairead O'Dowd who had agreed to take the case pro bono within 12 hours of the summit, for reasons she described as professional and also personal, as a single parent. The legal review of Liam's build logs took 40 minutes. The conclusion was delivered in 4 words, there is no case. Every line of code. Every timestamp. Every email. Every documented development decision. Liam had built Clearflow in a manner so meticulously clean that an intellectual property challenge would have been legally unwise and publicly catastrophic for StratumTech to pursue. Marcus Vane had accused a man on a stage, in front of 400 witnesses and a live stream, of something he could not legally establish. The implications of that were significant. Meanwhile, in the StratumTech boardroom, 2 of the company's largest clients, mid-sized Irish firms who had been at the summit and who had, through various networks, connected the dots between Crestline's announcement and the man Vane had humiliated, had arranged calls with their account managers to discuss their contract renewals. One of those calls used the phrase, "We need to assess the leadership stability of our partners." That phrase, in corporate language, is a very specific kind of alarm. Marcus Vane held a press conference on Thursday afternoon. He had written his own statement and his PR team had rewritten it 3 times and he had reverted to his original version because he did not believe, fundamentally, that he had done anything wrong. He said that he stood by his decision to address what he had believed to be a legitimate IP concern. He said that the company wished Liam well in his future endeavors. He said that StratumTech had always valued its people. Nobody believed the press conference. That's the thing about performing certainty for 20 years, when it finally cracks, everyone sees it at once. The tech community had already begun the very Irish ritual of quietly refusing to work with someone. A prominent Dublin recruitment firm updated their client list. 2 StratumTech VPs submitted resignations by end of day Thursday. The board placed Vane on temporary administrative leave on Friday morning. His statement said it was his decision. It was not his decision. And StratumTech's stock, listed on the Euronext Dublin exchange, fell 14% over 4 trading days. Not catastrophically. Not enough to kill a company of that scale. But enough to be noticed. Enough to be a number that sits in a quarterly report and requires a full paragraph of explanation. Enough that every investor who read that paragraph would know that the 14% had a name attached to it. Liam gave one interview. 1. He chose the Irish Times. He spoke for 30 minutes. He talked about Clearflow, what it did, who it was for, why it mattered. He talked about Aisling. He talked, briefly, about Siobhan, just enough to explain why he had been so careful, why every decision had been made in the context of a child who needed him to get it right. He said nothing about Marcus Vane except, I hope he gets to think about what he learned that day. I genuinely do. Because there's still time for people to change how they see the world, if they choose to. Clearflow's waitlist hit 4,000 businesses in the first week after the announcement. Liam hired his first 3 employees, all women, all exceptional, 2 of them former StratumTech colleagues who had watched the summit from the same room and had made their own private decisions that day. The Crestline offices gave them a corner of their co-working space in the Docklands. They began building. Properly, this time. In the daylight. On the Friday of that week, exactly 10 days after the summit, Liam collected Aoife from school. Mrs. Keane from next door had baked them a cake. It had blue icing and it said, "Well done Liam," in slightly uneven letters. Aoife ate 3 slices. Liam ate 1 and then sat at the kitchen table while Aoife did her maths homework and thought about something he had been trying to articulate for days. He was not triumphant. That was the thing. The people who had watched from the outside, the ones who had followed the story and needed it to feel like a victory, perhaps wanted him to feel triumphant. But what Liam actually felt was something closer to grief that had found its correct shape. He had built Clearflow because Siobhan had always said his mind was too good to give entirely to someone else's company. He had protected it because Aoife had to come first. He had refused to break on that stage because he had already lived through the worst thing, and Marcus Vane, for all his certainty, was not the worst thing. That night, after Aoife was in bed, Liam sat with the photo of Siobhan for a long time. And he said the thing he always said, "I'm still here. I'm still going." And then he said something he had never said before. He said, "I think she would have loved what I built." And now, before we close, I want to ask you something. Because this story is not over. Not really. Liam Connelly is 3 months into building Clearflow with his new team. He is not yet a billionaire. He is not yet on the cover of Forbes. He is a single father who gets up at 6:30 every morning, makes Aoife's packed lunch, drops her to school, and then goes to the Docklands and builds something he believes in, with people who believe in him. And here is the question I want to leave you with, the one I want you to sit with tonight, or tomorrow morning, or whenever the quiet finds you. How many Liam Connellys are out there right now, quietly building, carefully protecting, raising their children in the margins of their ambition, who have not yet been given the moment that makes the world stop and look? How many are sitting in a packed lunch queue or a school car park or a kitchen at 2 a.m., building something the world hasn't seen yet? And, most importantly, who in your life might you be underestimating right now, because they're quiet, because they leave at 5:30, because grief made them small in your eyes when it actually made them enormous? Think about that. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something in it, then share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet strength is still strength. That going home to your child at 5:30 is not a weakness. That grief does not make you smaller. Share it with the single parent in your life. Share it with the person you know who is building something in the evenings when no one is watching. Leave a comment below, tell me which part hit hardest for you. Was it Liam? Aisling? The moment on the stage? Or the question at the end? Tell me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We tell stories like this because we believe that the people history doesn't notice in the moment are often the ones it remembers in the end. Hit subscribe. Turn on the bell. And I'll see you in the next story. Because there are more of them. There are always more of them.